Hello and welcome to the second video in JavaScript Basics series about arrays. Today we will be talking about the property of an array object called length. The length property represents the number of elements in the array. Value has to be between 0 and the maximum value for a 32-bit integer. On top of that, it always has to be greater than the highest index in the array. Let's see how it works in the typical use case in the first example. First example returns number 4 as you would expect, and the second one will return number 0. No surprises here so far. But what if we skip some index values? Let's see what happens then. The first expression, where we create an array and fill it with 3 elements, returns the expected size of an array when property length is used. The result is 3 as expected. But why do we get length equal to number 5 when we add only one new element, but not at the end of the array, but rather at a given index? The explanation is simple. Length property of array object is connected to numerical properties. This means that length is being recalculated anytime the numerical property is changed or created. So when you populate a new numerical property, set value at given index position, the length property checks whether the new index is greater than the prior greatest index and changes the value in property length accordingly. Now you might be wondering, what value is at index number 3? We can check that very easily by accessing the given index and returning value at given position. When we try to access the value at index 3, we get undefined, because that is the actual value at given index. Such index is not defined, therefore also value there is undefined. You might be asking at this moment, if there can be empty non-populated indexes, how does JavaScript know how to iterate over such an array? The answer to this is simple. The array object inherits methods from its parent class object, and this parent has a method called keys that returns only the numerical properties that are actually set with the value. When we use it, you will see that the only indexes returned are the ones with the real set value. Index 3 is missing. So in the future, if you feel confused about array that can have certain indexes empty and are wondering what should be the correct value in property length, use this rule of thumb. The length property of an array is always greater by 1 than the largest numerical property returned by the object keys method called on an array. One example that contradicts the rules that we covered so far is as follows. This is one of the examples I know about that breaks the rule I shared with you, and it shows how inconsistent JavaScript can be sometimes. There are no numerical properties when we call the object keys method, but at the same time the length property is set. The reason is simple. In this case, the thing that sets the property length is an array constructor method, which takes the only argument passed and sets it as a length of the newly created array. It does not make much sense in the context of our examples, but it can be useful in certain situations, and that's probably why it was introduced into the language. We have talked about the allowed range of values that length property can accept. It is any value between 0 and 2 to the power of 32, which is somewhere around 4.3 billion. What you probably did not know is that you can actually assign a value to the property yourself and modify the existing array at the same time. Let's see what we can do here. We are first creating an array with 3 elements as it shows when we use length property. Then we are able to extend the array with additional 2 elements by increasing the length property by 2 to a value of 5. This creates two empty slots, which for the most use cases behave either as undefined or as if they did not exist at all. Next, we show the maximum value of length property, which is one less than 2 to the power of 32, which is roughly 4.3 billion. We are again extending the array by setting the length property to such a large number, and what we actually are doing is creating a sparse array. You might ask, what is a sparse array? Well, basically an array where some indexes do not have a value set, but instead are created empty, and when you try to access a given index, it returns undefined value. The last thing we are doing is shortening an array by decreasing the length property. This in fact removes all the numerical properties that are greater than or equal to the value in a length property. Okay, so that was an array object property called length. I hope you learned something new and interesting today. I sure did learn a lot researching this topic. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you in the next video, this time about the first of the array methods.